Hello all, welcome back to this channel. I am Yamuna. In the previous video, we have discussed about the first pillar of psychology, and now we are going to discuss about the second pillar of psychology. Now we are going to discuss about cognitive, which includes perception, thinking, memory, and intelligence. Let us first discuss about the definition of cognitive psychology. It is the science of how we think and process information. It is concerned with our inner mental processes such as attention, perception, memory, intelligence, problem solving, decision making, thinking, reasoning, and language. Each of these components are pivotal in forming who we are and how we behave. Now we are going to discuss about perception. The way we organize, interpret, and consciously experience the stimulus is called perception. Perception involves in bottom-up processing and top-down processing. Bottom-up processing is also called as data-driven processing. In this, we recognize the stimulus from the features of the stimulus. In top-down processing, we use our background knowledge to recognize the stimulus. Supraliminal versus subliminal. A subliminal stimuli is too weak to perceive, though we are aware of it. The process of perception of subliminal stimuli is below the threshold of conscious perception or the absolute threshold level. There are 0 to 49% chances to detect the stimuli. Supraliminal stimuli can be perceived through the conscious mind, which is above the absolute threshold level. This is the process of perception. We receive the stimuli through our sensory receptors and then respond accordingly through interpretation and organization. This is how we perceive. Now we are going to discuss about Gestalt theories or principles. Gestalt theory states that whole is different from sum of its parts. The first principle is principle of figure and ground. Figure is something that we focus on. Ground is the surrounding disturbance. Here in this picture, the red color objects are the figure and the yellow background is ground. Principle of closure. Our mind perceives objects as whole. For instance, there are incomplete forms of triangle, square and circle, but our mind perceives them as whole. Principle of grouping. Principle of grouping is divided into three types: similarity, proximity, continuity. In similarity, elements that look alike are grouped. Here in this example, the green colored dots are grouped and perceived. Proximity. Elements or objects that appear close to one another are grouped. Example. Here there are 3 groups of 6 hearts which varies in their size, and they are grouped according to their size and are perceived. Continuity. Objects that are continuous are grouped and perceived. Principle of contour. It is the boundary between figure and its ground. Principle of context. The context changes while there is a change in the perception. Example, rain is perceived by the farmers is different in different situations or different contexts. Principle of contrast. We perceive a figure larger or brighter in relation to its background, so that we perceive them as separate things. Principle of pregnance or simplicity. Perceiving and interpreting ambiguous or complex images as the simplest form. Principle of isomorphism. Relation between experience and the brain. For example, the route map to your friend's house. Principle of adaptability. The perceiver who adapts himself to perceive similar stimuli. For example, adapting to a new place or a new workplace. Thinking. It is manipulating information when we form concepts engaged with problem solving, reasoning, and decision making. Thinking is an implicit problem solving behavior. Thinking is behavior which is often implicit, hidden, and in which symbols are ordinarily employed. Problem solving. Problem solving is a mental process that involves discovering, analyzing, and solving problems. The ultimate goal of problem solving is to overcome obstacles and find a solution that best resolves the issue. In order to correctly solve a problem, it is important to follow a series of steps. Step 1. Identifying the problem. It is an obvious step. Identifying the problem is not always as simple as it seems. Step 2. Defining the problem. After the problem has been identified, it is important to define the problem by careful analysis, and it should be pinpointed in terms of specific goals and objectives. Step 3. Gathering all the information about the problem. It is required to collect all the information about the problem through all the possible sources. Step 4. Formulating alternatives. After collecting all the relative information, find out various possible solutions for the problem. Step 5. Evaluating each alternative. In this step, one must analyze and evaluate each possible solution and the outcome it produces. Step 6. Selection and implementation of the solution. After analyzing all the possible alternatives, the best alternative, which has the maximum benefit and minimum loss, preferably with no loss at all, is to be chosen and is to be implemented. Step 7. Verification of the solution. The effectiveness of the solution is to be verified based on the outcome. Problem solving strategies or methods. First one, trial and error. Try different solutions until the problem is solved. Second one, algorithm. Algorithm is the step-by-step problem solving method. Heuristics. These are the rules of thumb we often use to guide our cognition. Heuristics is divided into types: availability, representativeness. Availability is something that is readily available information, whether it is accurate or not. Representativeness. It is based on how closely a new object or a situation is judged to match an existing prototype of the object or the situation. Example, people judge others based on the stereotypes, that is like all black are Africans. And the other one is analogy. It involves the application of techniques that worked in similar situation in the past. Now we'll discuss about decision making. It is defined as a selection of course of action among several alternatives. Every decision making process produces a final choice, that is, it can be an action or an opinion of choice. Steps involved in decision making process. Step 1. Objectives must be established first. Step 2. Objectives must be classified and placed in order of importance. Step 3. The alternative must be evaluated against all the objectives. Step 4. The alternatives that is able to achieve all the objectives is the tentative decision. The tentative decision is evaluated for more possible consequences. The decisive and additional actions are taken to prevent any adverse consequences from becoming problem and starting both the systems, that is problem analysis and decision making all over again. Now we'll discuss about memory. It is a cognitive process, helps in recalling and retrieving the information over a period of time depending upon the nature of cognitive task. Stages of memory. There are of 3 stages: sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. Sensory memory. The incoming information first enters the sensory memory. It has a large capacity, however it is of very short duration, that is less than a second. Short-term memory. Short-term memory holds small amount of information for brief period of time, that is 30 seconds or less. Short-term memory is fragile but not as fragile as sensory register where information decays automatically in less than a second. Long-term memory. Materials that survive the capacity and duration limitations of the short-term memory finally enter the long-term memory. It has a vast capacity. It is a permanent storehouse. Most of the memory is never forgotten because it gets encoded semantically. From this picture, we can say that sensory memory receives information from the sensory input and passes the information to short-term memory by putting attention. When there is no attention, the information is lost. In short-term memory, by maintaining continuous rehearsals, the information is encoded to or passed to the long-term memory. When there is no rehearsal, the information is lost. As long-term memory is the permanent storehouse, it stores all the information and is used to retrieve the information over a period of time. This is how the human memory is classified. Now, the long-term memory is divided into two types: declarative memory and non-declarative memory, which is also called procedural memory. In declarative memory, all information related to facts, dates are part of this memory. Example: sun rises in the east and India got independence on 15th August 1947. Declarative memory is also called explicit memory because it consists of the information that is explicitly stored and retrieved. Moving on to non-declarative memory, it is not based on the conscious recall of information but on implicit learning. Procedural memory is primarily employed in learning motor skills like riding a bike. Talving classified declarative memory as episodic memory and semantic memory. Episodic memory is used for more personal memories such as sensations, emotions, and personal associations of a particular place or time. Example: autobiographic memory and flashbulb memory. Autobiographic memory is a memory of particular events within one's own life, where flashbulb memory, we store information through experiences, either good or bad. Whenever there is a situation related to that, you'll remember it all. Semantic memory. Semantic memory is the memory of general awareness. All the concepts, ideas, rules of logic are stored in semantic memory. Due to semantic memory, we remember the meaning of words, symbols, codes, etc. Forgetting is the apparent loss of information already encoded and stored in an individual's short or long-term memory. The first systematic attempt to understand the nature of forgetting was made by Hermann Ebbinghaus. Theories of forgetting. Forgetting due to trace decay, also called disuse theory. When the memory is not used for a long time, they simply fade away. Forgetting due to interference. The new information that enters the long-term memory interferes with the recall of earlier memories, and therefore interference is the main cause of forgetting. Interference is of two types: proactive interference, retroactive interference. In proactive, past learning interferes with recalling of the newly learned materials. In retroactive, newly learned interferes with recalling of the previously learned materials. Forgetting due to retrieval failure. The memory may become inaccessible either due to the absence or inappropriate use of retrieval cues that are being employed at the time of recall. Motivated forgetting. In this, information is unconsciously forgotten, especially if it is particularly painful. This type of unconscious forgetting is called repression, and conscious deciding to forget is called suppression.